Episode 35 of the Underdog Sports Baseball Show. The regular season has officially concluded, and this is our first official hot stove edition of the show.
The postseason has officially concluded. The regular season concluded over a month ago.
I guess what I should say is the 2019 season has concluded.
There you go.
And with that, an entire decade of baseball has concluded, which is good because, admittedly, during the offseason, sometimes you got to stretch out content a little bit. So look forward to either next week or the week after, not the year after. You can tell it's a little bit early in the morning. Bryce is actually the one who is nursing himself back to health right now. He got not one, not two, but 3 wisdom teeth pulled. But yet I'm the one who sounds like they got their wisdom teeth pulled right now with some of the crap coming out of my mouth already.
Yeah, kind of an impromptu procedure on my end. Dentist gave me the heads up 3 years ago that I was going to need these things pulled. Woke up in a little bit of pain on Wednesday, made the phone call Thursday. Thought it was just a consultation, but Leo Page at Greenwich Village Oral Surgeon, thank you so much for the quick hookup.
Yeah, so Bryce's teeth are good. He's healthy. And I guess with that said, it's just me and Bryce today. Sam is currently out celebrating Miami's win to get them 1 game over 500 against Florida State. I know we're a baseball podcast, but we were saying before, who do you think is first to get fired, Willie Taggart or Dan Quinn?
Dan Quinn. But the season ends earlier in college. So I guess the question is whether or not Dan Quinn makes the full season, which I just don't think he will. That team is a disaster right now.
So you think it's just a calendar thing?
Yeah, but I mean, they do the owner down in Atlanta does the right thing most of the time, so I don't know if he would pull the plug mid-season. And since they're on their bye right now, I know this because Julio Jones will not be in my fantasy football lineup this week, so that should be a loss for me. But if they didn't fire him this week, I don't think anything can happen in these next 8 or so to get rid of him, so I think Taggart has to go first.
All right, so like I said, next week we will have our decade in review, but we are going to review now what has been a fantastic World Series. Went 7 between the Nationals and the Houston Astros. But before we do that, our first off-season Bovada Sportsbook pick of the week. So as you can imagine, when there's no games to pick, we got to get a little creative on this. So what we're going to do the next few weeks is break down some of the odds to win the 2020 World Series and what we think of 2 to 3 teams' odds on a given week. So the first one we'll start with is the favorite. Bovada has your most likely World Series champion to be the Houston Astros at plus 600. I mean, Garrett Cole seemed like in his post-game press conference when he was wearing his Boris Cap hat.
Garrett Cole seemed like he was out of there.
Boris Corp hat, I mean, he seemed ready to go. But even if he goes, the Astros are still going to have Verlander, Greinke, a returning Lance McCullers, and Jose Urquidy in their rotation. The lineup is going to be as good as ever. Personally, I have no problem with Bovada having Astros as the favorite, but what are your thoughts?
I wouldn't have them as the favorite. I think that loss of Cole was going to be... Well, I'm assuming Cole's gone. I think we can all safely assume that Cole is gone. And without Cole, that team just takes it on a different look. I know Greinke's good, but that combination of Verlander-Greinke is not Cole-Verlander.
Correct. I think it's a matter of... I think if Garrett Cole goes to the National League, I'm still very, very okay with maybe having the Astros be the favorite. But if he signs with an American League team, a lot of people think the Astros, so he's going to go with the Angels. So he would be directly competing with the Astros upwards of 5 or 6 starts a year. That could shift it a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I just think I think the Astros still have a playoff lineup. 1 through 9, they're still arguably best in the league. No worse than top 3.
With upgrades to make, too. I mean, as great as Robinson Chirinos, and I'm drawing a total blank right now on who their other catcher was in the postseason. He also hit a bunch of home runs.
Oops. Anyway, the Astros, I wouldn't have them as the favorite just because I think they're going to take the biggest loss of all these contenders.
Well, but I also think in a lot of ways, wow, their depth chart right now has no catchers. That's something crazy. I think they have upgrades to make, though, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make, in that, they lost Chirinos. I'm still trying to find who this other catcher was, because it's going to drive me crazy. Maybe they go after Yasmani Grandal or someone in free agency where the money you take the money you save not giving Cole a mega deal, you make minimal upgrades elsewhere. The other catcher, Martin Maldonado.
Maldonado's been...
How could I have forgotten Martin Maldonado?
I don't know. I guess you're not as close with Martin Maldonado as you thought you were.
I guess you're right. Tied with the Red Astros for the best odds per Bovada are the New York Yankees at plus 600. I'm going to be honest with you. I think as a Yankee fan, I don't know how I feel about this. I think this is like how the Astros, it was saying, who are they going to upgrade? I think for the Yankees, unless they get one more starting pitcher, and again, the starting pitching was not the reason we got bounced in the playoffs.
I'm not sure about that. Are you sure it wasn't because of the starting pitching?
No, I think the biggest thing for me was clutch hitting. Because the starting pitching, the bullpen was a little overworked by the end for sure. No one's going to argue that. But at the end of the day, the starting pitcher kept us in almost every game. They didn't give us the length of a Cole and Verlander, but not many teams are going to do that unless you have Strasburg or Scherzer, which we saw in the World Series.
For whatever it's worth, Bovada gave me the Yanks at plus 625 last year in June. So I would take Yanks at plus 600. I think that's still a pretty reasonable bet because you're forgetting we're getting in a perfect world, we're getting a full season out of Stanton. I don't know what we're going to do with Andahar, but that's
full season of Severino.
Full season of Severino, Andahar, Frazier. We have assets to make trades if we need to. Maybe this is the year we finally go back and bet to the old ways and just spend in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, look, you come into next year at a minimum with hopefully a healthy Severino, Paxton, and Tanaka. I really like that righty-lefty, 1-2-3. It's just then from there, how much do you trust Happ? How much do you trust Jordan Montgomery? Is Jonathan Loaiza ready to be a starter?
I trust Happ.
Where does Domingo Germán fit into this whole equation?
I don't think he does. But I really think from this past team, the only major loss is going to be CeCe. And is that even a major loss?
Remains to be seen. We already do know, and I guess this is as good of a time as any to fit it into the notes. Aaron Hicks will be out the first 2-3 months of the season. He ended up getting Tommy John surgery for his elbow injury. For comparison's sake, Didi got the surgery right around the same time Hicks did, and he made his debut in June. Food for thought.
Yeah, it's just something to think about. What were we just... I was just thinking... Chapman just re-upped his deal, so he will be back.
Chapman also re-upped. We're going to give, once we get into free agency a little bit next show, we'll give our full opinions on that. But yeah, Chapman's locked up for the next 4 years in pinstripes through maybe actually only 3.
Only 3 years. 3 for 48. He reworked the deal.
3 for 48, so not too much of a hit for the Yankees. He'll be signed through his age 34 season. The bullpen will be back. The Yanks could be in good shape. This team, though, and this will be our last one for the week, the Los Angeles Dodgers, Bovada has a plus 800 to win the World Series early on. And in my opinion, I think the Dodgers, despite how bad it ended this year, would be my pick going into next year. Only because I think there's no way Ryu leaves. I think that makes too much sense for both teams, where Ryu has been plagued by injuries throughout his career. I think he's comfortable in Los Angeles. I just think they got that whole lineup coming back. And similar to what you said about the Yankees, you'll have a second year removed from injury, Corey Seager, Gavin Lux up at the major leagues for the full season, Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, all these young guys finally in for the full season.
There are rumors that Seager would be available in a Lindor trade.
But not to the Indians, that they would get a third team involved potentially, which would be crazy if they got Lindor. But
Dodgers are another team. Their farm system's deep enough that they can make a move.
Yeah.
What are their odds? What did Bovada have them at?
Plus 800, third best.
I think that's probably the best bet on the board.
Yeah.
Because that division's weak. I don't really see a team beating them after the division, so that would be 8 straight titles.
I mean, the Giants are openly rebuilding. I think the D-backs will end up flipping Robbie Ray at the deadline. Padres, who knows? We'll see what the Tingler man will be able to get out of them.
Let's see what the Tingler man...
And the D-backs...
Well, if the Tingler man is the only thing keeping the Dodgers away from an 8 straight title, I feel pretty...
Who did I miss?
You missed the Rockies.
The Rockies could potentially bounce back, but...
They can't be worse.
But they're not going to compete with the Dodgers all year.
No.
So we'll see what happens, but those are your 3 favorites to win the World Series next year per Bovada. And now, number 35, really easy one for the Yankees, a newly minted Hall of Fame number. Mike Mussina wore 35 from 2001 to 2008 with the Yankees. Recent Yankees to wear it. Corey Guerin and Chance Adams wore it this year. Mike Pineda. Gotta love Mike Pineda.
Yeah,
right?
I think the Yanks did a weird thing with the number 35, kind of reissuing it so quickly.
They waited 5 years though.
It was 5. They waited.
2008 was, and then Pineda didn't wear it until 2012. But then 2 players wore it in 2012: Pineda and David Ardzima.
Yeah, but I feel like Mussina was too good and was there for too long to be reissuing numbers to David Ardzima.
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, when a Hall of Fame player plays for your team, Brendan Ryan shouldn't be wearing it within 5 years.
No, that's very weird.
Do you know who the last Yankee to wear it before Moose was? This will be like a fun fact.
Wetland?
Wetland did wear it, but he wasn't the last one. You had Wetland, Hideki Arabu, the Fat Toad, and then one more guy before Moose.
I don't know.
He is the father of potential National League MVP, Clay Bellinger.
Interesting.
Nice little fun fact.
Yeah, that's a fun fact.
That's all I got on the number 35. But World Series Game 5. So as Ryan Zimmerman pointed out going into the game, the series at the time was as even as it gets. Each team had 2 wins and 19 runs scored coming into the game. And we were actually doing the podcast last week when this news broke prior to the game that Max Scherzer would not be pitching Game 5. He woke up Sunday morning and couldn't get out of bed because of the pain in his neck and right trapeze muscle was so intense to the point where he had to fall out of bed and pick himself back up. Couldn't lift his right arm. His wife, Erica, had to lend a hand just so he could get dressed. Scherzer, for that, said, I was disappointed as I could possibly be not to be able to pitch tonight. It's Game 5 of the World Series. I pitched through so much crap in my career that would be easy to pitch through at this point. This is literally impossible to do anything with. Scherzer got a cortisone shot, and they said that it would take 48 hours to kick in and to reassess. So keep that in the back of your mind for going on. So Joe Ross, who spent a decent chunk of time in the minor leagues this year, he was the one who ended up getting the ball for the Nationals, and the Nationals crowd was unbelievable. I mean, when Joe Ross was coming out of the bullpen, peppering him with love when he came to make the first pitch, they were so loud for him. But ultimately, when you think you're going to get Max Scherzer and Garrett Cole and you end up getting Joe Ross, big advantage Garrett Cole, and the Nationals lost 7-1 to the Astros on Sunday, and the Astros at that point were 1 win away from their second World Championship in 3 years. Garrett Cole looked great on the mound, while Yordan Alvarez, Carlos Correa, and George Springer each contributed a 2-run homer in the winning effort. Joe Ross himself, he was much better than his final line indicated. The Astros got on the board against him in the second when Yoli Gurriel reached on an infield single with 1 out, and Alvarez slugged a 2-run homer to center field. Quick side note, did any player, non-superstar addition, I would say, do more to show the baseball world what they're made of than Yoli Gurriel this playoffs? I feel like every time I saw him, it was a big hit or a great play at first base.
I think everyone knew he could hit, but his defense in this series was outstanding. For righty first baseman, too, and I know we'll talk about the most controversial play he made in Game 6.
Yes.
But he was doing great work in the field. I mean, he'd make diving plays, kept diving to first. A lot of the time, it seemed like it was against Trey Turner, though. So, for better or worse.
Correct. Alvarez from there, he singled with 2 outs in the fourth, and then Carlos Correa promptly hit a 2-run over to make it 4-0. All told, Ross threw 78 pitches across 5 innings, allowing 4 runs, 5 hits, a pair of walks, and 1 strikeout. Garrett Cole did not pitch well in Game 1 of the World Series, but we had more vintage Garrett Cole in Game 5. Held them scoreless through 6 innings, and then after Juan Soto hit a solo homer to center field and 1 out of the 7th, Cole got out with any trouble. Did get a little help from Lance Barksdale, the home plate umpire. I mean, that pitch, the 3-2 strike 3 on Victor Robles in that inning was so incredibly outside. We're going to actually get to Lance Barksdale in a little bit because he said some things that should never happen in a Little League game, let alone a World Series game.
It was embarrassing for umpires. Very bad look for human beings.
Yes.
As a fellow human being, I was embarrassed for
I
it.
went on a long Twitter rant about this. Anyone who I went to college with knows I have a deep, deep trust of machines stemming from...
Distrust.
What did I say?
Trust.
Distrust. Big distrust of machines stemming from my love of the Terminator franchise. And after this, I'm kind of all aboard the robot umpire train. Just because I do think it was that bad. Garrett Cole's final line, 1 run, 3 hits, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts on 110 pitches. From there, Joe Smith, he got out of the jam in the 8th, no runs. George Springer hit a 2-run homer off of Daniel Hudson in the 9th. to make it 7-1. And then from there, final score 7-1 for the Astros. So the umpire auditor for Lance Barksdale for this game. I mean, the big thing, when Adam Eden is saying to an umpire in the fourth inning, I know the pitch before was pretty close, but don't make up for it on the next one. I mean, we saw that with Gary Sanchez in the ALCS. Barksdale's correct call rate was actually pretty strong. Again, follow umpire auditor on Twitter. Very good for games like this. 93.5% is pretty solid. But again, I mean, his largest miss was 3.23 inches, which is pretty substantial. Had 4 calls helping the Nationals, 5 calls helping the Astros. It seems like a lot of calls went the Astros' way this postseason. Maybe that's just me as a Yankee fan, but in the 6th inning, Barksdale doesn't call strike 3, and Yan Gomes, I mean, it was very clearly a strike, and Yan Gomes stood up thinking it was strike 3, and he tells Gomes, that wasn't a strike because you were taking off on me, and Gomes had to reply, oh, it's my fault, to which Davey Martinez yelled, wake up, it's the World Series. If you're an umpire in such a pivotal, in any game really, but a pivotal game like the World Series, how are you letting your ego get in the way of not making a strike 3 call because the catcher stood up on what was clearly a strike?
It's very, like I said, it's embarrassing. You can make the wrong call. It's how I've never umped professionally or ref professionally, but at camp in Color War, the one thing you tell the umpire is whoever's reffing the game, make the call and stand by the call. Don't argue back with the player.
Correct.
Granted, that's with 15-year-old kids, but in this situation, you have to just make the call based on no other reason than what is the correct call to make. You can't make a call because a catcher stood up a second or 2 earlier than you would have liked. If a ball is thrown within the strike zone, under no circumstance can that be called a ball.
No, I'm totally with you. The first of many umpiring miscues we're going to talk about throughout this podcast.
That one I think was actually the worst of them all. That one was bad because that was an ego thing. Everything else was a weird interpretation of a rule. That was a strike that the umpire acknowledged was a strike, but didn't like the way the catcher rose early. Come
Ridiculous.
on.
So Bryce Harper's big campaign in his last year or two with the Nationals was to make baseball fun again.
I thought that was his campaign this whole time down there.
For the most part, but I don't think it really...
Well, I think it was more of a...
Didn't really, go into the stratosphere until there was Make America Great Again. He had something to play off of. But I want to make a huge, huge shout-out to Julia Rose and Lauren Summer for making baseball fun again. If you somehow didn't hear what happened with the two of them, just Google them. It's going to come up. The two of them are now banned from every MLB stadium for life, but boy, was it worth it for the fans at home. And these two girls, actually, with that one action, made me want to get on Instagram.
And did you?
I did not.
Well, what are you waiting for?
I know.
I mean, there's other websites that...
Yeah,
Google. If Google works, Twitter works. For this one event in particular, anything works.
I mean, is there anything better than...
Nope.
No, I'll say it, and I'll keep it appropriate. Is there any better combination than baseball and boobies?
I'll go with no. I'll go with no for the sake of the podcast.
Especially in the World Series?
No, that was good, and hey, good for those two girls. I'm sure they gained thousands of followers.
They were also doing it to raise awareness for breast cancer. I think that part kind of gets lost in the shuffle of this whole thing.
Well, that part's going to get lost in the shuffle because MLB cracked down so hard on them. But I guess that the MLB was right to do that because they were exposing themselves on... I can't imagine the people at Fox were particularly thrilled with this.
No. And I'm not particularly thrilled with myself that I didn't notice it live. Seems like something I'd be all over.
You're probably too focused on the umpire yelling at the catcher.
Probably. Couple social media tidbits from that game. From Sarah Langs, Garrett Cole's 47 postseason strikeouts were tied for the second most in a single postseason all time. The only pitcher with more was Kurt Schilling with 56 in 2001. Yordan Alvarez per MLB Stats is the youngest AL player with a 3-hit game in the World Series since Tony Kubek in 1957. This is pretty amazing for me. Carlos Correa's third career homer in the World Series tied Derek Jeter for the most home runs in the World Series by a shortstop in MLB history. And the last one I will throw out from that game is from Tyler Kepner. It's extremely rare for a team to use 5 different starters in the World Series. The last team to do it was the 1980 Philadelphia Phillies. So, with that said, moving along to Game 6, the Nats are on the brink of elimination, but I think you and I, even in talking about it, we were both like, with Steven Strasburg on the mound, if anyone's going to keep this going, it is him, and he absolutely delivered 8+ strong innings in Game 6 of the World Series with the Nationals on the ropes. Adam Eaton, Juan Soto, and Anthony Rendon all contributed home runs, and the Nats lived to play another day in a 7-2 victory in Houston. The offense got going early as the Nationals used small ball to take a 1-0 lead in the top of the first against Justin Verlander. Trey Turner reached on an infield single, and then from there, Adam Eaton moved them over with a sac bunt, and Anthony Rendon sent him home with a grounder up the middle. Quick question for you. I think now in sabermetrics, baseball, this and that, your best hitter's hitting 2. Trout hits 2, Judge hits 2, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on the Nationals' consistent use of Adam Eaton to bunt in the 2-hole, really, which is like an old-school baseball move at this point. The bunt in general, but especially out of the 2-hole.
I always liked the bunt. I thought it was, if you need to get the runner over, going up against those pitchers the Astros are throwing out there, if you're facing a Cole, if you're facing a Verlander, if you're facing a Greinke, you need all the runs you can get. And to have a confident, professional hitter like Adam Eaton in your 2-hole, a guy that can lay one down and get the runner over, that's important. That's still an important part of the game that's being overlooked a lot in a lot of places across the league. So the Nationals have their 2-hitter just as a professional guy, a skilled guy like Eaton. I think it makes all the sense in the world. Clearly it paid off for him.
No, it definitely paid off big time. But then from there, the Astros came roaring back. They scored 2 in the bottom half of the second against Steven Strasburg. George Springer sent a rocket off the wall in left field for a double and advanced to second on a wild pitch. Altuve brings him in with the sac fly, and Alex Bregman broke the 1-1 tie with a solo homer into the Crawford boxes in left field. This homer will forever be known as the home run where Bregman carried his bat to first base, tried to hand it to the first base coach.
What do you think of that?
I had no problem with it, honestly. Because honestly, I would almost... I think, to me, that's not as bad, because at least he's running out of the box, than an epic bat flip. Maybe I'm wrong, but the fact that one of baseball's premier guys on and off the field, Alex Bregman, has to apologize for this after the game,
well, I think
that's my biggest issue.
I think he apologized in large part because when Juan Soto did the same thing, that I guess there was some perception amongst the Astros, against the fans, that Bregman carrying the bat to first ignited something in Soto. I don't think that's true. Soto was raking all series long. Soto's been raking all playoffs long. So I thought Soto was going to hit that homer. Whether or not Bregman carried his bat to first, second, third, or all the way around the bases, irrelevant. But just the way things turned out for him, and they lost the game, you end up with poop on your face.
Correct. So Strasburg, those 2 runs he gave up, it was actually in the first inning. My notes are all over the place because I was trying to update them as the week went on. Which proved to be a very long list of notes for this week. But an interesting note, and it's something we've heard about the Astros time and time again, was maybe they were picking up on signs or tipped pitches. And Strasburg said as such in his postgame interview with Tom Verducci on the Fox broadcast. He said that pitching coach Paul Menhard noticed he was tipping his pitches in the first. And then from there, the Astros didn't score against him the rest of the way. From there, he was wiggling his glove to throw the Astros off. And then from there was the starting pitching matchup that we envisioned, Verlander-Strasburg on the biggest stage. Offenses were mostly dormant until the fifth inning. From there, Verlander made a couple of mistakes in the top half of the fifth. He gave up solo home runs to Adam Eaton and Juan Soto. Like you said, Soto mimicked Bregman, bringing his bat to first base. And then Verlander saw his way out of that inning, but the final line, 3 runs on 5 hits and 3 walks with 3 strikeouts on 93 pitches. He is now 0-7 in the World Series, which is absolutely unbelievable, whereas Strasburg was speeding towards a complete game. He worked around a leadoff single in the 6th, 1-2-3 in the 7th, and 8th on 16 combined pitches. But before we get to Strasburg in that 9th inning, we're going to talk about the call. Sam Holbrook, who was working behind the plate for Game 6, he was in the spotlight on Tuesday night. Yan Gomes led off with a single against Brad Peacock in the top of the 7th. And then from there, Trey Turner followed up with a weak tapper that caused Peacock to charge off the mound to the third base side. His throw was off the mark and unable to be corralled by Yoli Gurriel at first base. Gomes advances all the way to third and Turner to second, and the Nationals are ready to break this thing open. From there, though, Holbrook ruled that Turner interfered with Gurriel Turner was called out, and Gomes had to go all the way back to first base. Davey Martinez absolutely went ballistic. And I think the biggest issue in all of this was the 5-minute delay as the umpire determined whether or not the play was reviewable.
It wasn't.
Which it was not, and they knew that from the get-go. So here's some analysis on that play. Turner ran to the inside of the first baseline, and Peacock's bad throw, in my opinion, was the real issue. Gurriel had to reach into the baseline to attempt to retrieve it, and Turner did the only thing he could do as a base runner, given that the base is placed in fair territory. Turner, in essence, was punished because Peacock made the bad throw, and if he had ran exactly the same way, he would not have been called out for interference if he had made an on-target throw. And earlier in the game, Jose Altuve was not called out for interference despite a similar and arguably more egregious infraction, as 538 pointed out. After the inning, Davey Martinez gets into a huge shouting match with third base ump Gary Cedarstorm. He was so upset that he had to get held back by Chip Hale and Tim Boger as he was ejected from the game. And my biggest issue with that is we later found out that Davey Martinez went nuts because the third base ump said, "Control your dugout." All crazy. We're going to button it all up shortly. But after the game, Joe Torre, who runs the umpires in MLB, said to Ken Rosenthal that the ruling had nothing to do with Turner's route. It had to do with Turner interfering with the glove. And Turner said, "I mean, what else do you do? I don't know. The batter's box is in fair territory. First base is in fair territory. I swung. I ran a straight line. I got hit with the ball. I'm out. I don't understand. I could understand if I veered one way or the other, but I didn't." So let's break this down one by one. First off, terrible call on the big stage.
That's a terrible call, but you can forgive that call. That's a forgivable call because you can argue there's interference. That's not an outlandish
to me,
call.
it seemed like he was going to beat the throw no matter what. That was one of my issues.
I didn't have any issues with the call itself. I didn't agree with it, but I understand why that call gets made because the way it looked, real time, Turner, ball, glove, they all kind of got there at the same place. So if you're going to call interference on it, you call interference. That makes sense. It makes sense to me, but then again, it really comes down to how the umpires chose to manage the players and the coaches in the series, which was embarrassing on all accounts.
Yeah, I mean, I think my couple of takes are, one, I think my biggest thing is to make that call on the biggest stage of the World Series, a potentially series-altering call. We don't see that a lot, period, let alone in a game like this. And I think to penalize Turner for literally just running in a straight line, I don't think that's fair to the runner. I don't think that's fair for any team where you're being penalized because the other team made a bad play. That just instinctively doesn't make any sense. But the biggest thing for me is just how the umpires handle this in general. I mean, the fact that they looked so clueless on the field, taking almost 5 minutes to review it, to the point where Trey Turner literally had to call out Joe Torre, one of baseball's most revered figures, saying, he's right there, he's got his head down, why don't you just ask him? But the fact that the umpiring crew had the balls to call out Davey Martinez and say, "Control your dugout," you just made a potentially series-altering call. Put your head down and just live with it. Don't try to antagonize these guys because at the end of the day, your job as the umpire is to make calls. Nobody's there to see you.
Nobody has ever paid money for a baseball game to watch the umpires decide the outcome. And the umpires this entire series, they really tried to make their footprint. It seemed as though they really tried to make it about them. Whether it was yelling at Yan Gomes, whether it was telling Davey Martinez to control his dugout, who from afar seemed like they were behaving perfectly fine.
All things considered, could you imagine, I think my dad even texted this to me during the game, if this was what happened with the Savages in the box, Brett Gardner's going out there and breaking a bat over someone's head.
No, the umpires should have been fearful for their lives. In the wrong circumstance, with the wrong team, no player raised their voice at an umpire. It seemed as though every player controlled themselves remarkably well.
Trey was pretty fired up, but rightfully so.
He was fired up, but it was it was on him. No one else on the Nationals dugout was out of line. All the players remained in the dugout. If nothing else, they stayed in the dugout. They stayed where they were supposed to be.
The worst thing that would have happened was Davey Martinez has a heart condition that he was putting on the line out there.
That's exactly what happened.
And I think something that just came into my head that was one of my biggest issues with the play, actually, is you make the interference call at first, regardless. That's fine. I don't get, though, how Yan Gomes has to go all the way back to first base. I understand that he advanced to third on the interference call, But no, I think at a minimum he should have at least been on second base in that situation. And again, I don't know the nitty gritty particulars of the interference call. At umpiring school in Little League, you're so rarely making that call. But I just don't understand. It was a forced play at first base that was almost beaten out. Gomes being at second happened completely independent of that play.
Well, I think it might be. I mean, I'm sure they got that part. I'll give the umpires the benefit of the doubt. This one time, just this one time, I'll give the umps the benefit of the doubt. But I'm imagining that in the rule book, an interference at first is almost equivalent to a dead ball, and that rightfully so, the runner was sent back to first, assuming they upheld the rules properly. But you never know with this group.
So from there, karma ruled its ugly head, and for good measure, Anthony Rendon, soon after that call, tacked on 2 insurance runs with a double to right center field in the top of the 9th, took off all kinds of pressure off of Strasburg, and then from there, he returned to the 9th inning at 102 pitches, attempting to become the first pitcher to throw a complete game in the World Series since, if you can get this, I'm going to be very impressed, because I never in a million years would have thought
I actually saw the stat in the game. It was Cueto, right?
Unbelievable. I feel like I don't even remember a lot that Johnny Cueto was on the 2015 Royals, let alone that he threw a complete game.
You know what my one memory of Cueto on the Royals would be? I'm pretty sure you and I were at camp. You and I were at camp when the trade went down. I think you, Ging, and I were talking about it in the golf cart.
What a motley crew.
Oh, yeah. Good cart.
Wouldn't have had it any other way other than what
Kenny may have been there.
So then from there, Strasburg's out for the 9th. He gets Yuli Gurriel on a deflected line drive to Asdrubal Cabrera. And then from there, acting manager Chip Hale decided to bring in lefty Sean Doolittle to get the platoon matchup against Yordan Alvarez.
Can I go back to Cueto for a minute?
Sure.
Has there been a move? I mean, that Cueto trade was, 5 years ago now? Has there been a rental that's paid off that well since?
Chapman.
For the Cubs?
Yeah. But the flip side of it is you also got to think what they gave up, I guess. You know, we got Gleyber Torres for Chapman. I believe the headline in that Johnny Cueto trade was Brandon Finnegan. I'm going to pull up the old Johnny Cueto Wikipedia page. Yeah, Finnegan, Josh Lamb, and Cody Reed. So it's not like the Royals gave up, a plethora of Major League talent.
Well, it's not like the Royals stayed particularly relevant after that trade either. I mean, I love it when a team goes all in for a season, pays off, they have their ring, and that's it. And, I mean, the Royals did it. The Cubs were built to last, with or without.
The A's had tried to do it the season before.
And it blew up in their face.
Big time.
That was a weird move out of Bean. Bean has not been good on the trade market.
No.
He's much better.
That Donaldson trade, they got fleeced.
But it seemed like they fleeced themselves on purpose almost. Because they didn't have to move him.
Yeah, I mean, for the John Lester trade, when they went all in 2014, they gave up Lester and Johnny Gomes they got Lester and Johnny Gomes for Cespedes. I don't think they were going to re-sign Cespedes, so I was okay with that trade. I think the one that I struggled with more was when they traded for Samardzija and Jason Hamill for Addison Russell.
Well, I don't think Samardzija is particularly good. Samardzija was a very good college football player. Often unforgettable.
Would have been the second wide receiver picked in that draft after Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, he was really good at Dame. I think he made the Walter Camp All-American team. I actually know for a fact he made that team.
You know what? I'm going to take back my criticism of that Jeff Samardzija trade real quick, because they did give up Addison Russell and Dan Straley, but in the long run, maybe having Addison Russell not on your roster was for the best, given what we know now. But they did flip Samardzija the following year to Chicago and got Marcus Semien, their all-star shortstop. And those are hard to come by.
All-star shortstop? No, that's... yeah, I guess. But that's not... You're not projecting forward assuming a domestic violence case. That's kind of crazy.
That'd be very difficult to do. Or you're a mind reader, which we're not. So Doolittle comes in to get Alvarez, lines out for the second inning. Correa doubles off the left field wall, but then from there, Robertson Trinos popped out to second base to end the game. Strasburg's final line, 8 1/3, 2 runs, 5 hits, 2 walks, 7 Ks on 104 pitches. His 1.46 career postseason ERA and 55 1/3 innings is now the fourth lowest all time, minimum 50 innings in the postseason. I see what they were doing at this point with Chip Hale. Again, it wasn't Davey Martinez managing, just really trying to hammer home the outs at the end of the game and finish it off. But how do you not let Strasburg try and go get 9 at that point?
I don't know why even start him for the 9th if you're not going to finish the 9th. I was bummed. I think all Nats fans were at least a little bummed. But, I mean, again, They're managing for a reason. We are not.
No, but it's like at that point, whether it's 110 or 120 pitches, the likelihood of him pitching Game 7 is
0.
Impossible.
He was the least likely pitcher on the roster to go.
So, and why waste Doolittle, who very likely might pitch in Game 7? It's all right. It all in the end worked out for the Nationals.
The Nats are happy with it.
Just a little food for thought from there. Adam Eden, some quick Adam Eden tidbits for you.
So going back to that. So there's been no complete games in the World Series since Cueto, despite pitchers like Lester going there, Kershaw's been in 2, Verlander's been in 2, Cole in this series, Porcello, Sale, Price, Cy Young winners, and no one's been able to go the full 9 of the series.
I mean, dude,
Kluber.
I was going to say, you didn't even mention Kluber and Bauer.
Bauer, that's back when Carrasco and Salazar were really good. Arrieta was
none.
So there have been very good pitchers who are not able.
But again, you got to also remember though, even compared to 2015, you don't see as many complete games in baseball.
People are getting soft.
All right, so little Adam Eden love. He had 9 sack bunts in the regular season, the second most of any non-pitcher, and the most by a player in a 15-homer season since Brett Gardner in 2014. And he became the first player in baseball history with a sack bunt, home run, and hit by pitch in a World Series game. Pretty impressive. Bregman in this game became the second player to hit multiple first innings homers in the same World Series. The other was Dodgers' Mickey Hatcher in 1988, and his 8 ribbies tied Troy Glaus in 2002 for the most World Series RBIs by a third baseman in one series. Verlander, to his credit, he crossed the 4,000 pitch mark for the season in that game. That is a lot of time throwing a baseball. And that's before you factor in the bullpen sessions, the work in between starts, etc. But at the end of the day, it's the 10th first inning run that he allowed in the postseason, which is 2 more first inning runs allowed than anybody else in a single postseason MLB history.
That was 10 in this postseason?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
He has allowed 8 homers in this He allowed 8 homers in this postseason, which was tied for Kershaw in 2017 for the most in a single postseason all time. The fact that those two share that dubious distinction is pretty incredible in itself, I feel like.
Those are 2 great guys. So.
Yeah, those are 2 sure first ballot Hall of Famers. But Verlander in the World Series, as great as he's been, everyone talks about Kershaw in the playoffs and his failures. Verlander in 7 World Series games is 0-6 in 38 innings pitched, a 5.68 ERA, and 2.13 home runs per 9. And
his team lost. I think he has a 7th start that his team also lost, correct?
Yep.
So his team's never won a World Series. That's a tough break.
So Bregman and Rendon on back-to-back nights became the first third baseman to drive in 5 ribbies in a World Series game. But we're going to end it with some Juan Soto love before we go to Game 7. He had 5 homers in the postseason, the most by any player age 21 or younger in one postseason. And he, after homering against Clayton Kershaw and Verlander in the same postseason, became the second player all time to homer off 2 different MVP winners in a single postseason.
Ooh.
Can you name who the last player to do that was?
Oh. If I had to guess, Gibson.
JD Martinez against the same 2 pitchers in 2018.
That makes sense. Yeah. They got to stop giving up pitchers love giving up home runs these days.
You know what the thing was with both Kershaw on some level, but Verlander to a huge extent. He gave up a ton of home runs in the regular season. I think he gave up the most in the American League, actually. But he was so good at limiting everything else that he had like a .75 whip. Against a team like the Nationals, though, with a good deep lineup, if you don't limit everything else, you're in trouble, and that's what he didn't do. Especially when you're pitching against the likes of Stephen Strasburg.
Yeah, if you're going to make... you can make a mistake when you're playing not the Nationals. The Nationals are good, man. Obviously, they proved it all season. They proved it the last 3 quarters of the season. But the way Verlander's giving up these homers, it's scary because one wrong pitch can bite you. That was my concern with a guy like Scherzer all season long. That's why I picked against the Nats in the wild card game, but said if they got past them, they could run the table. If people want to go back and check through the podcast tapes, I believe I did say that.
Also, make sure to remember when I picked the Nats to go to the World Series.
I remember. I remember.
Which brings us to a Game 7. It is a Game 7, to quote the member berries, that we will member forever.
Will we? I didn't find it that memorable.
I think given the narratives coming into the game. The Nationals' improbable run through the playoffs ended in glory Wednesday night in Houston as they rallied late to defeat the Astros 6-2 in Game 7 of the World Series. Their first championship in franchise history, the first one for DC in 95 years since the 1923 Washington Senators with Walter Johnson. And if you were a home fan team in the World Series, the home fans went home unhappy all 7 games because the road team won all 7 games in the series, which to me is absolutely insane.
That's something I never thought I'd see. That almost doesn't make sense in any sport, more so baseball than any of the other Big Four leagues, because the rules change.
Yeah,
the rules change stadium to stadium. So for an NL team to go to these AL parks, win the 4 with the DH, and the AL team to lose them.
Well, I think my 2 points there are, one, especially this series, the Astros went 60-21 at Minute Maid in the regular season, which is unfathomably good, but lost all 4 in the World Series. But you mentioned the rule change, and I'm actually glad you brought that up. If there was a team designed to take advantage of the DH in the World Series, it is the Nationals. Just because between...
What, because Howie Kendrick?
No, but between Dozier, Howie Kendrick, Zim, you have all these...
You have professional hitters. That's the oldest team in the league. That's a professional team.
You have all these 30-something-year-old veterans who can now just play in the lineup, where you don't want them out there defensively. Dozier, meanwhile, did you see how wasted he was at the World Series celebration yesterday? Gets on stage, immediately takes his shirt off, which I guess is like his thing now.
It could be anyone's thing. You just have to take your shirt off. Very simple to do.
It's true. All right, so the game itself didn't look early great for the Nats as Max Scherzer battled just to get through 5 innings. Scherzer, meanwhile, I said wait about the cortisone shot. It worked. Worked like gangbusters. Game 6, he looks at reporters, and all he says to them is, I'm ready. So he gets the ball in Game 7, and he surrendered a solo homer to Yoli Gurriel in the 2nd. Carlos Correa had a ribby single in the 5th. But other than that, no damage through 5 innings for Max. He had 7 hits and 4 walks, only 3 strikeouts, but really battled his way through. Just to put it into perspective, 11 of the last 23 hitters Scherzer faced reached base. He threw 103 pitches in 5 innings. And in the 2nd inning, the 4 balls put in play were hit by Yoli Gurriel for an 100.8 mile per hour homer. Alvarez had an 106.1 mile per hour single. Correa hit a 104.8 mile per hour single, and Springer 105.2 mile per hour line out. My question for you is: we were talking about the sack bunts for the Nationals before. The Astros, they hit the home run. They have 2 runners on base and no one out, and Robinson Chirinos lays down a sack bunt and pops out to the catcher for an easy out. Scherzer from there retires the next 2 batters, preventing the Astros from adding to a 1-0 lead. To me, this was one of the worst managerial decisions of the postseason. You had Scherzer on the ropes. His control wasn't there. Guys are literally hitting it 100 off the bat every single time. I know Chirinos isn't, what the rest of that lineup is, but he had some huge home runs in the postseason. How do you at least not give him a chance?
Because he's Scherzer. With Max Scherzer, you have to play better safe than sorry with Scherzer because he is so dominant. Even if he's off a little, it's Chirinos versus Scherzer. Are you really going to try and tell me with a straight face that you feel comfortable with Chirinos up against Scherzer?
Maybe if it was Martin Maldonado, I would have.
Maybe so.
No, I'm with you there. It's just, and again, I don't super subscribe to the sabermetric community necessarily, but this was one where I agreed where I thought giving out and out there didn't make a ton of sense. Even to your point, it is fair. How much do you think Chirinos is going to come through against Max Scherzer?
Also, you go up 2 that early. There's a huge difference between 1 and 2.
Yep. It was the first World Series clincher pitting 2 Cy Young winners against each other. Zach Greinke absolutely delivered. Through his first 6 innings, no runs, scored by the Nationals.
6 and a third.
I'm going to get to the 7th right now. He came back out to the mound in the 7th, and that's when things began to unravel. Anthony Rendon, Mr. Cool, he got the Nationals on the board by pulling a line drive homer into the seats in left field. Greinke then walked Juan Soto, which, again, we hate to talk about the umpires, but, there was a pitch in that series, a curveball down in the zone that would have made it a 1-2 count. Instead, it went 2-1. That was absolutely a strike and caught the bottom of the zone. Again, something like that, those calls go both ways. Like the Joe Ross slider, for instance, that wasn't called a strike, that borderline call, and Correa hit a 2-run homer. But
you'd like to call. I'd like to not have balls and strikes be the big issue with these umpires.
Correct.
Because that objectively that's hard.
Yep.
But that one didn't seem as egregious as certain other missed calls to me. But
no, I'm with you there. So Will Harris comes in to pitch for the third game in a row. And then from there was Soto on base. He tries to keep the lead intact. And Howie Kendrick on an 0-1 count swatted a Harris cutter down the right field line, 322 feet, clanked off the right field foul pole, and suddenly the Nationals had a 3-2 lead. And the Nationals just kept going from there. Asdrubal Cabrera singled to chase Harris from the game. Roberto Osuna came in. Ryan Zimmerman walked, but then other than that, he was able to escape with any further damage. And then from there, in the top of the eighth with Osuna in, 1-out walk to Adam Eden. He steals second. And then from there, Soto, ribby single to right field. Howie Kendrick then put runners on the corners with a single. And then from there, A.J. Hinch put in Ryan Presley, who got Cabrera to line out, and the damage was done.
Is Howie Kendrick the best hitter in Nationals postseason history?
Might be Juan Soto, but he's definitely the clutchest.
Well, Howie Kendrick has the 2 biggest hits in franchise history.
Correct. And then on the other side of things, to get through the 6, 7, and 8, Patrick Corbin came out of the bullpen, and then from there, he was absolutely great. He came in the 6th, had a relatively easy 6th and 7th inning. He came out in the 3rd inning of the 8th, 1-2-3 order from there. 3 scoreless innings, 4 strikeouts. It was so big for them that they got to save the rest of their ammo. And Corbin, with that one relief appearance, in my opinion, really lived up to that contract right then and there.
No, I thought Corbin actually had a pretty decent postseason. He had a good regular season for their number 3 starter.
Yeah, he was the starter of all of them that was thrust into the bullpen the most in the postseason, which is hard.
And he handled it very well. That was an arm. He was an asset out of the pen for those guys when called upon every series.
So it's 4-2 through 8, and then from there, the Nationals pretty much took the game for themselves. Played it 2 runs on a bases loaded, Adam Eden single for good measure. Corbin did his job. Daniel Hudson took the ball to start the bottom of the 9th, slated to face the bottom of the lineup. Springer pops out, Altuve strikes out, and Michael Brantley chases a 3-2 slider for strike 3. Nationals win the World Series 6-2. No surprise, your MVP was Steven Strasburg.
Would you have given it to Strasburg? Because you can make a real case for Soto.
You could have made a strong case for Rendon also. I just think Strasburg, you beat Justin Verlander twice in the World Series.
On the road.
I think you got to be the MVP. Gets a win in Game 2 and Game 6.
I've always been more in favor of giving it to a hitter instead of a pitcher. Because if you're only pitching 2 starts, Soto raked all 7 games.
But they were 2 dominant starts.
It could have been if they let him go the full 9.
Really full circle for Strasburg. He got famously shut down before the 2012 postseason. But if these were his last starts with the Nationals, because he does have the opt-out.
He did opt
out. He opted out. What a way to go out. He's the first player picked first overall in the draft to win the World Series MVP for the team that drafted him. And per Stats by Stats, this is the first time ever that 2 MVPs from the 4 major sports championship series in the same year attended the same college, Kawhi Leonard and Steven Strasburg, San Diego State Aztecs.
That is a fun fact. That is nothing more than coincidence.
Correct. And umpire auditor to go into a couple tweets from the game. The lowest correct call rate of the series from Joe Wolf, 88.9%. The largest miss was 4.43 inches, which is absolutely enormous. And again, the Nationals, there was that, Robles call that went their way, but the Astros had 12 calls help them to the National 7. That's huge.
Ball and strike calls are going to go either way. You can't make a federal case over that one. And if you're hanging your hat, if the Astros are sitting at home thinking, oh, man, this one call went this way, you can't do it over that particular call.
So Strasburg and Scherzer are the 7th and 8th pitchers ever and the first since Mad Bum in 2014 to start 5 wins for their team in a single postseason. It's amazing. The Nats trailed by 2 in the 8th against Josh Hader in the wild card game, 2 in the 8th against Clayton Kershaw in Game 5 of the DS, and 2 against Zach Greinke in the 7th inning of Game 7 of the World Series. Won all and won the World Series. Before Anthony Rendon arrived at home plate in the 7th inning, 2 of the 20 Nationals to hit in this game had reached base, and by the time he arrived at home plate in the 9th, 12 of the 18 had reached base. A nice little screw you. Ozuna gave up some runs. I'm sure Astros fans are currently not so fucking glad they got Ozuna.
I mean, I would. You know my stance on this stuff. I want them all out of all the leagues. So
Greinke, he defensively played a great game.
Yeah, I noticed that. A lot of comebacks.
So per Ryan Spader, he's the first pitcher in baseball history with at least 5 assists through 5 innings of a World Series game.
That was very apparent even to just casual baseball fans watching.
I mean, Sarah Langs brought this up. It's amazing that the Nats on May 23rd, when they were 18-31, had a .380 winning percentage, which was the 4th worst in baseball. Only the Mariners, Royals, and Orioles had worse record.
Funny thing is, the Mariners started out 13-2. So how they went from 13-2 to they go 5-30 over the next 35 games. Jeez.
And this was the big thing. It was, Garrett Cole said he was ready to go, and they never brought him in. They brought in Will Harris for the 3rd straight game. Julia Morales tweeted out that Garrett Cole and A.J. Hinch had agreed on some rules for how he would be used in Game 7. He wasn't coming in the middle of the inning, and he wasn't pitching if they didn't have a lead. And in fact, Cole warmed up on his own earlier in the game. So that explains why he didn't come in for Will Harris. I mean, look, Will Harris was a guy all postseason. He crushed the Yankees in that series. He had gotten you so many big outs the past 3 years. I think he went with the right guy there. I mean, that Kendrick pitch, he didn't even make that great of contact.
It was very bizarre swing out of Kendrick, but still, Astros fans are going to be kicking themselves over not having Garrett Cole in that game.
Oh, of
and
course.
If you have Greinke on that short of a leash going out into the 7th, that one bad pitch, you're going to pull him.
So that's
have Cole start.
So that's my other question. So Greinke's at 80-something pitches when he gets pulled. Would you have even pulled him in that situation?
I thought he was doing well enough. I thought he was dealing. I would have stayed with him. But if it was made up in Hinch's mind that one mistake he's gone, don't even let him get to that point where he makes a mistake and start the 7th inning with a fresh Garrett Cole. You go Cole 7, then Harris 8, Ozuna 9 if that's how you want to play it. But if Greinke's on that short a leash, why risk it? I mean, he knows his players better than I do.
That is true. 2 managerial hirings across baseball happened this week for teams who are trying to get to the World Series. The first of which happened in Kansas City. Mike Matheny is back as a big league manager.
Guess who's back? Back again.
He got the Royals job. He was introduced as the 17th manager in franchise history on Thursday at Kauffman Stadium, replacing Ned Yost, who retired. Matheny, 49, joined the Royals toward the end of the 2018 season as a special advisor under GM David Moore. Essentially underwent an 11-month interview, one in which he passed impressively. Matheny in this press conference, he was a good manager with the Cardinals, .591 and .474 in 7 seasons in St. Louis. Got fired in 2018 after starting at 47-46, 21-22 postseason record overall. He mentioned his shortcomings that he made in St. Louis, which included how he handled players and how he wanted to improve overall. He said he hired a media strategist to help him, consult with the media and how to publicly talk. He also hired a consultant to better acquaint him with analytics after he was said to be not super analytic friendly in St. Louis. Personally, I think, Matheny leans a little more old school, and I don't know if he would have been my choice just because I don't know if he's the guy who's going to get the most out of young players. I think he would have been better with a win-now team. But
look, in Matheny's defense, what happened in St. Louis? What year did he take over the Cardinals? 2012?
Yeah, right after Tony.
And who left in 2011?
Pujols. Well done.
Worked him into the show again.
Well done. I think he's a good manager. I think he would have been better with a win-now team, though. But, I agree,
he's a hard-nosed guy, and I don't think this Royals team's going anywhere in the foreseeable future. But it's a big league managerial job. You got to take him when they're offered.
Oh, no, of course. I don't blame Matheny. I just don't know from the Royal side if he would have been the best fit.
Is he the best guy to grow with this team? I don't think so.
That's my biggest point.
But if he's a born-again manager and has a new lease on life, maybe he's got lightning in a bottle down here.
So Matheny, the Royals went the veteran route, and the Mets did a 180. They announced Friday. Yes.
I think I blew my Guess Who's Back load a little too early. Can I do it again?
Sure.
Guess who's back again. Beltran's back.
Tell your friends. And we did tell our friends, and a lot of them were not happy. The Mets announced Friday they have signed Carlos Beltran to a 3-year managerial contract with a 4th-year club option, making the Puerto Rican native the first Latino manager in Mets history. Team plans to introduce him at a press conference Monday morning at Citi Field. Jeff Volpon said, "We are thrilled, as we know our passionate fans will be, to have him back in the family." Beltran signed a 7-year, $119 million contract before the 2005 season with the Mets, made 5 All-Star teams. Tenure ended in July 2011 after getting traded for Zach Wheeler, which how ironic is it going to be that if Zach Wheeler somehow made his way back to the Giants as a free agent?
Is that being
Beltran goes
discussed?
to the Mets. No, it's just something that somebody threw out on Twitter that I
You know
like.
what? Now that we're talking through this out loud, I think Beltran was almost a better fit with the Royals job.
Yeah, and he would have been a former player there as well. He becomes the 9th person.
How many of Beltran's former teams were looking for new managers this offseason? I guess 3.
The Cardinals were not. The Rangers were not. And
Yankees
the Astros and Yankees were not.
But 3?
Yeah.
Beltran played in a lot of teams.
He'll become the 9th player to both manage and play for the Mets. Gil Hodges, Yogi Berra, Joe Torre, some of the big names there. Willie Randolph. Beltran, in his career, I mean, a guy, I think in a lot of circles, we talked about it last night, not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think like Vlad, because that's a good comparison for him, will get in on the second try. Could be cool if he gets inducted while as the manager of the Mets. But after he retired in 2017, he took a job as a special advisor for the Yankees and Brian Cashman. They loved the work he did in his role. He's replacing Mickey Callaway with the Mets, and Brody Van Wagenen said the Mets had a very detailed managerial search process that ranged from Joe Girardi, Eduardo Perez, who was one of the other finalists, Derek Shelton, Tim Boger, amongst others. But Beltran, unlike those other competitors, only interviewed for that one job, making it clear he wanted to manage the Mets alone. He said, "I feel like I played long enough to learn the game, and I do feel that I have a lot of things to contribute in the clubhouse. Yes, that experience is not there because I've not done it, but I do believe it is something that with the opportunity I can learn." Guy still works in New York, beloved in the New York area. I think once Joe Girardi, once you didn't pony up to get him and you were going to go someone with a little less experience, Beltran is the guy. I said to my Met fan friends, they were pissed because they still had that emotional attachment of watching Beltran look at an epic Adam Wainwright.
They got to get over that one.
But it's like,
come on,
once
guys.
Girardi was gone, who did you want to hire?
If you're not going to go with one of the established guys, Girardi, Buck, or Dusty, this is as good for a fresh face, new manager. This was the number one guy on my list. Bilingual, fans should love him, even though Mets fans don't always know what they're talking about. And this is a great player, by all accounts, fantastic teammate, great baseball mind. What else do you want out of a manager?
I'm totally with you there. I absolutely love the hire. I thought they knocked it out of the park.
This one I prefer to the David Ross hire because he's far enough removed from the organization.
There's no teammates.
There's no teammates, exactly.
And I do think an interesting move that they could make that's already been discussed is bringing Terry Collins aboard as a bench coach. I think Mets players, they love Terry. They weren't the ones who wanted the team to go, but it was time for a change when Callaway took over in 2017. You bring in a guy who knows the Mets players and knows
Callaway
the
also landed on his feet with the Angels.
Yeah. You bring in a guy like Terry Collins with managerial and Mets experience who has a rapport with Beltran, I think that could be big.
That's always a weird dynamic for me. I don't know how well that plays out.
Beltran was the one who brought it up in his interview, though. He said, and even with the Yankees when he interviewed, he said, I would want Terry Collins to be my bench coach.
Oh, well, I take it back. If Beltran's that comfortable with it, sometimes you get I don't know. Personally, I don't want an inferior, a lower-ranking staff member to have more experience than me. That just seems a little fugaz, as you would say.
It's a little fugaz, but, that happens from time to time. Last thing we're going to touch upon for this week's show, just a little Yankee love. Larry Rothschild out as the Yankee pitching coach. What were your thoughts on that?
You know what? He was fine. He never struck me as a guy that turned anybody into... He was never a guy that struck me as a great pitching coach. I can't think of someone that he impacted and turned into an elite arm that didn't already have the elite stuff. Is he going to go to the Phillies, or is that just...
They already signed Brian Price to be their pitching coach, so that ship has sailed.
I like Brian Price. He's the guy that went on that all-time F-bomb tirade, correct?
Yep.
He'll play great in Philadelphia.
So, we'll see. It'll be interesting what happens with Larry Rothschild and the Yankees pitching coach role. To me, there's one clear guy who a lot of fans have clamored for, and I really agree with it, and that is David Cone. He's young. He's 56. He's been around the team. He's analytic heavy, and he is the most intense motherfucker I have ever seen play for the New York Yankees. Right now we're interviewing college baseball coaches. We interviewed the pitching coach from Michigan and Arkansas. Go up to the booth.
We can do better.
Go up to the booth. Coney wants to coach. bring him in.
Yeah, but is that a win now move?
I think it could be. I think the biggest thing you're losing with Rothschild that you have to figure out, and this is a negative for Coney, is he was the veteran coach on the staff.
That's a very young staff.
Which is big. Yeah, without him, you got Booney, Phil Nevin, Josh Bard. The rest of our coaching staff is very young.
Eric Thames?
Marcus Thames. Eric Thames plays first base for the Brewers.
I don't know. Youth movement in the Bronx, I guess.
All right, we'll go two more things real quick because they're quick points that I just don't want to have to move over to next week. Josh Hader and Aroldis Chapman won their respective Relievers of the Year awards. You want to talk about
optics.
Real
not
bad.
Here. This
real
is
bad.
not a good place to talk about optics.
But do you think either actually were the best relievers in their respective leagues? Because I actually think the answer is no.
Kirby Yates.
To me, Kirby Yates and Liam Hendricks very much should have won this award. They went with the big name narrative.
They went with the big name troubled past narrative, so kudos to Major League Baseball for then getting on your high horse for women exposing themselves for breast cancer.
And Aroldis Chapman didn't even have the highest WAR of Yankee relievers.
Britton.
As much as I love to shit on Britton, he delivered this year.
I thought Britton was good.
All right, and you mentioned Francisco Lindor and the Dodgers.
I also mentioned Pujols.
Of course. JP Morosi tweeted out that they might go after Francisco Lindor this offseason. Corey Seager could become a trade candidate. They have so many pieces here. Personally, I wouldn't give up on Seager, but
I feel like this is selling low on Seager.
You're selling very low on Seager here.
Also, Lindor's under contract for, I believe, 2 more seasons? 3?
I think 3.
Including, I think it's 2020 and at least 2021. So, Lindor will be out there.
And, they would have let him go.
The Dodgers?
Yeah.
That's a $300 million contract for the Dodgers.
But they don't have any of those, though.
No, not at all.
Earliest free agent is after 2022, so you have him for 3 more years.
So what? The Indians need. If the Indians were to do this, they would need.
So here's the trade that got thrown out on Twitter, and this is what I want your thoughts on. Somebody on Twitter, some random guy, I threw out a trade that I actually liked. Do you think either of these teams said no? So you give up Lindor and Corey Kluber.
The Indians right now would say no because those are the 2 best players.
But the thing is, though, you get Kluber's contract off the books.
Kluber's contract's reasonable. They're playing $17 million this season.
Sure, but Clevenger, but in that rotation, Clevenger and Bieber are the arms of the future at this point. Kluber and Lindor for Dustin May, Corey Seager, Jock Peterson, and Tony Gonsolin. I think I'd do that trade if I'm them. You're getting your shortstop replacement. You're still getting an all-star shortstop back. Maybe not the all-star shortstop. And then in Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin, you have 2 front-of-the-rotation potential arms for years and years to come. And Jock. Who doesn't love Jock?
Yeah. You know what, Chase? You're solely on the trade. That's as good a haul as you're going to get for those 2 guys. Because that Lindor but you're giving up on 3 years of Lindor.
No, it's hard.
I feel like I'd want to run it back one more time with this team. Because I don't think the Twins are that untouchable. And I think that the rest of that division is still going to need another year to... the Tigers are bad. The Royals are bad. The White Sox might be a year away from contending. So I would run it back to the 2020 if I'm the Indians. Because a player like Francisco Lindor does not find his way to Cleveland very often.
Correct.
And it would be tough for me to sell this low on him.
All right, any concluding thoughts for the week?
Yeah, I don't know how the Houston Texans keep forgetting DeAndre Hopkins is on the team.
Fair.
That's what happens when we do the Sunday podcast and fantasy football.
You get a little bit of football action, especially in the offseason. We'll be back next week, though. For Bryce Holden, I'm Chase Fedorsky, and this is the Underdog Sports Baseball Show.